Captain Alan Brown floated near the viewport of the USS Intrepid and stared at the massive alien ship hanging silently in the darkness of space. The strange vessel was at least 3 times larger than any human spacecraft ever built. Its hull was made of a dark material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Alan had been in space for 15 years, but he had never seen anything like this. "Captain, you need to see this," said Dr. Susan Mitchell through the comm system. Her voice was filled with excitement. Susan was the lead scientist on this mission, an expert in alien technology. Alan pushed away from the viewport and glided through the Intrepid's main corridor toward the science lab. The ship had been on a routine patrol between Jupiter and Saturn when they detected an unusual energy signature. What they found was this ancient spaceship, dead in space but somehow still generating power. When Alan entered the lab, Susan was surrounded by holographic displays showing scans of the alien vessel. Her brown hair was tied back in a messy ponytail, and her eyes were wide with wonder. "Our scans show this ship is at least 50,000 years old," Susan said without looking up from her work. "Yet its technology is centuries beyond our own. The power core is still active but in a dormant state. If we can understand it, this could change everything for humanity." Alan looked at the data scrolling across the screens. "Is it safe to send a team aboard?" Susan nodded. "The radiation levels are normal, and there are no signs of life. The ship appears to have been abandoned long ago." 2 hours later, Alan led a team of 6 people toward the alien vessel in a small shuttle. Besides himself and Susan, he brought Chief Engineer Paul Garcia, Security Officer Lisa Ward, and 2 more scientists, Ben Miller and Sam Turner. They all wore standard EVA suits with extra oxygen supplies. The shuttle docked with the alien ship through what appeared to be an airlock. Paul used a special cutting tool to open the inner door, which slid apart with surprising ease. "There's atmosphere inside," Ben said, checking his handheld scanner. "Nitrogen and oxygen similar to Earth, but I still recommend keeping our helmets on." They entered a dark corridor with high ceilings. As they moved forward, soft blue lights activated along the floor and walls. "It's responding to our presence," Susan whispered, her voice filled with awe. The team moved deeper into the ship, documenting everything with cameras built into their helmets. The corridors were wide and curved, unlike the straight practical passages of human vessels. The walls were covered with strange symbols that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. "This looks like a control room," Paul said, when they entered a large circular chamber. The room was filled with what appeared to be control panels and displays, though nothing like the buttons and screens humans used. Instead, there were raised surfaces that glowed with soft light and curved indentations that seemed designed for hands with too many fingers. Susan approached what looked like the central console. "This technology is incredible. The materials alone are unlike anything we've ever seen. This metal-like substance isn't in our periodic table." As she moved her scanner over the console, something unexpected happened. A holographic display activated above the center of the room, showing what appeared to be a star map. The map zoomed in on a spiral galaxy that Alan recognized as the Milky Way. Then it focused on a small section that included their solar system. "It knows where we are," Lisa said, her hand moving to the weapon at her side. The display changed again, showing a massive fleet of ships moving toward a point that seemed to be Earth. The ships were unlike the vessel they were standing in. "With aggressive angular designs, is this a threat?" Alan asked, his voice tense. Susan shook her head. "I don't think so. This looks like a warning. These symbols here," she pointed to characters floating beside the display, "match patterns we found near the entrance. I think they translate to something like danger or caution." The team spent hours exploring the ship, finding what appeared to be living quarters, storage areas, and engine rooms. Everything was built on a scale slightly larger than what would be comfortable for humans, suggesting the original crew had been taller than average people. In what looked like an engine room, Paul made an exciting discovery. "This power core is still functional," he said, examining a glowing blue sphere surrounded by rotating rings. "It's using a form of energy production I've never seen before. Not fusion, not antimatter. Something else entirely." Meanwhile, in another section, Ben and Sam found what appeared to be weapons systems. "These look like particle beam emitters," Ben said, "but far more advanced than anything we've developed. Based on these specs, a single shot could disable one of our largest warships." When the team regrouped in the control room, Alan made a decision. We need to report this to Earth Command immediately. This ship, its technology, the warning it contains, this changes everything we thought we knew about our place in the galaxy. Back on the Intrepid, Alan sent a priority message to Earth while Susan began analyzing the data they had collected. 2 days later, they received orders to secure the alien vessel and prepare it for transport to Mars orbit for further study. They're calling it Project Phoenix, Alan told his crew during a briefing. Every major nation on Earth is pooling resources to study this ship and possibly adapt its technology for our own use. Susan looked troubled. We need to be careful. That warning the ship showed us. I think it was telling us about a threat that's still out there. These beings, whoever they were, built this ship as a weapon against something dangerous. All the more reason to understand its technology, Alan replied. If there's a threat coming toward Earth, we need to be ready. Over the next few weeks, more research ships arrived from Earth. Teams of scientists and engineers began the careful process of studying the alien vessel. They learned that the ship had powerful defensive shields, weapons that could destroy small moons, and engines capable of speeds that made human spacecraft look like they were standing still. Susan spent most of her time trying to access the ship's database. One evening, while Alan was checking on her progress, she made a breakthrough. I think I found something like a black box recording, she said, her face illuminated by the glow of her computer screen. It's the last log entry before the ship was abandoned. With trembling hands, she activated the recording. A holographic image appeared, showing a humanoid figure with gray skin, large eyes, and a narrow face. The being spoke in a language of clicks and whistles that none of their translation software could decipher. But the emotion in its voice was clear: fear. Behind the alien, they could see what looked like a battle. Fires burned and other beings ran in panic. Then the recording ended. They were at war, Alan said quietly. And I'm guessing they lost, Susan nodded. But they left this ship behind with all its technology intact. Maybe they hoped someone would find it and use it against their enemy. Alan looked at the dormant controls of the alien ship. Then that's what we'll do. We'll build our own version of this ship, using everything we can learn from it. If this threat is real and it's coming to our solar system, humanity will be ready. In the darkness of space, the ancient warship waited, its secrets slowly being uncovered by the curious species that had found it, a species that had no idea how much they would need those secrets in the years to come. 5 years had passed since the discovery of the alien vessel in space. The massive project to build a human warship based on the alien technology was nearly complete. The shipyards orbiting Mars buzzed with activity as workers made final adjustments to what many called humanity's greatest achievement. The ship was named Arcturus, after one of the brightest stars in the night sky. Admiral William Porter stood with his hands clasped behind his back as he gazed through the observation window at the nearly finished warship. At 62 years old, Porter had spent most of his life in the United Earth Space Force, but nothing in his career had prepared him for a project of this scale. The Arcturus was 3 times larger than any previous human spacecraft and packed with technology that seemed like magic just a few years ago. "Impressive, isn't she?" said a voice behind him. Chief Engineer Kate Nelson approached with a tablet in her hand. She had been one of the lead engineers on Project Phoenix since the beginning, working directly with the alien technology to adapt it for human use. "Beyond impressive," Porter replied with a slight smile. "Is she ready for the tour?" Kate nodded and led the Admiral through a series of airlocks until they were inside the massive ship. The corridors were wide and brightly lit, with crew members rushing back and forth as they prepared for the upcoming launch. "The particle beam weapons are fully operational," Admiral Kate explained as they walked. "Based on our tests, a single shot can disable or destroy any current human warship. The phased shield technology we reverse-engineered can withstand energy outputs equivalent to a small star. And the propulsion system," she paused with a proud grin. "Well, let's just say the Arcturus will be able to cross our solar system in minutes, not months." Porter nodded, impressed but also concerned. "And the neural interface? Have we found a pilot yet?" Kate's expression grew serious. "We've tested over 5,000 candidates. Only 3 showed the brain patterns needed to connect with the ship's systems, and only 1 scored high enough to be considered viable." Lieutenant Greg Howard. They entered a large circular room at the heart of the ship. In the center was a strange chair surrounded by floating holographic displays. A young man sat in the chair with various sensors attached to his head. He appeared to be in his late 20s with short brown hair and intense focus in his eyes. "Lieutenant Howard," Porter said as they approached. "I've read your file. Impressive record." Greg turned to face them, carefully removing the sensors from his head as he stood and saluted. "Thank you, sir. It's an honor to be considered for this position." Porter studied the young man. Greg Howard had been a pilot in the Space Force for only 6 years, but his skills were legendary among his peers. What made him special, however, was his unique brain structure that allowed him to process information at speeds previously thought impossible for humans. "The neural interface requires a very specific type of mind," Kate explained. "The alien technology connects directly with the pilot's brain, allowing them to control the ship as if it were an extension of their own body. Most humans can't handle the information overload, but Lieutenant Howard seems specially adapted for it." Greg looked slightly uncomfortable with the attention. "I just see patterns more easily than most people, sir." "Always have," Porter nodded. "Well, Lieutenant, if all goes well, you'll be piloting the most advanced warship ever built by human hands. The fate of our species might rest on your shoulders." Before Greg could respond, an alarm sounded throughout the ship. Porter's communication device buzzed at his wrist. He answered it quickly, his expression growing grim as he listened to the message. "We need to speed up our timeline," he announced. "Deep space monitoring stations have detected multiple objects entering the outer solar system at high speed. Their configuration matches the warning images from the alien ship. They'll reach Mars orbit in approximately 72 hours. Kate's face paled. "But we're not scheduled for launch for another 2 weeks. There are still systems that need to be tested." "Then we test them on the fly," Porter replied firmly. "Prepare the Arcturus for immediate launch. We need every advantage we can get." The next 48 hours were a blur of activity. The Arcturus was quickly prepared for launch while Earth's existing defense fleet was mobilized. Military leaders from around the world gathered in emergency sessions to prepare for what many feared would be the greatest threat humanity had ever faced. Captain Olivia Clark was assigned as the ship's commander. At 40 years old, she had more combat experience than any other officer in the fleet, and a reputation for making smart decisions under pressure. She worked closely with Greg and the rest of the hastily assembled crew to prepare for the coming battle. "The neural interface is ready for full connection," Kate told Greg as technicians prepared the final systems. "Once we activate it, you'll be linked to every part of the ship. You'll feel the engines, the weapons, the shields, all as if they were part of your own body." Greg sat in the pilot's chair, trying to hide his nervousness. "What about the side effects you mentioned in training? The personality bleed from the ship's systems?" Kate hesitated. "We've limited the connection to essential systems only. That should minimize any influence from the alien technology on your mind. But I won't lie to you, Lieutenant, this is still experimental. No human has ever connected to the full system before." "Well," Greg said with a forced smile, "I guess I'll be making history either way." The first alien ships were spotted by telescopes on Earth's moon. They were massive vessels, each one larger than anything humans had built before the Arcturus. Their hulls were angular and aggressive, covered with what appeared to be weapon ports. There were 50 of them approaching in formation. Admiral Porter stood on the bridge of the Arcturus with Captain Clark as they received the first transmission from the alien fleet. The message was translated by computers based on language patterns discovered in the ancient ship. "Humans of Earth," a harsh voice spoke through the communication system. "We are the Zarketh Imperium. Your solar system is now claimed as our territory. Your planet will serve as a resource world for our empire. You have 48 hours to surrender your governments and prepare for occupation. Resistance will result in planetary bombardment and species extinction." The message ended, leaving a heavy silence on the bridge. "Well," Captain Clark said finally, "at least they're direct." Porter turned to face the crew. "Begin launch sequence. The Arcturus is now officially on war footing." In the pilot's chamber, Greg was connected to the neural interface for the first time. As the system activated, he gasped. Suddenly, he could feel the entire ship, every system, every weapon, every shield generator. He could sense the engines humming with power, and the life support systems maintaining perfect balance. It was overwhelming at first, like gaining several new senses all at once. But there was something else, something unexpected. As the connection deepened, Greg began to access memories that weren't his own. Images flashed through his mind. Battles in distant star systems, planets burning, strange alien beings fighting desperately against an overwhelming force. These were memories from the original ship, somehow preserved in the technology they had copied. And with those memories came knowledge. Battle tactics, weapon configurations, shield harmonics, all flooding into his mind faster than he could process. "Lieutenant Howard, are you ready?" Captain Clark's voice came through the communication system, sounding distant and muffled compared to the rush of information in his mind. Greg took a deep breath and focused. "Yes, Captain. The Arcturus responds to my commands. All systems are operational." "Then take us out, Lieutenant. We have a date with the Zarketh fleet." The massive warship rose from the Martian shipyard, its engines glowing with blue fire as it accelerated toward the approaching alien fleet. On Earth, billions of people watched through live feeds as humanity's greatest weapon launched to meet the greatest threat it had ever faced. In the pilot's chamber, Greg smiled as he felt the ship's power surge through him. The Zarketh had no idea what they were about to face. They thought they were attacking a primitive species, easy prey for their empire. They were about to learn how dangerous humans could be when backed into a corner. The battle for Earth was about to begin. The Arcturus moved silently through space toward the approaching Zarketh fleet. On the bridge, Captain Olivia Clark watched the tactical display with growing concern. The 50 alien warships were arranged in a perfect attack formation, and each one was the size of a small city. Earth's defense fleet consisted of 30 smaller vessels that were now taking position behind the Arcturus. "They have us outnumbered, and their ships are bigger than anything we've built except for the Arcturus," said Olivia to Admiral Porter, who stood beside her. "Are we really going to engage them with just one untested warship leading our fleet?" Porter's face remained calm despite the pressure. "They have no idea what we've built, Captain, and they've never encountered humans before. That gives us two advantages." In the pilot's chamber, Greg Howard felt the Arcturus respond to his thoughts like an extension of his own body. The connection was deeper than anyone had predicted. He could feel every system, every weapon, every shield generator. But the most surprising thing was the flow of information coming from the ship itself. It was almost as if the ancient technology had a kind of memory, a shadow of the beings who had built it. "Lieutenant Howard, what's your status?" Olivia's voice came through the communication system. Greg opened his eyes, though he didn't need them to see anymore. Through the ship's sensors, he could view everything around them in all directions at once. "All systems are operational, Captain. The ship is ready. The Zarketh fleet has stopped at the orbit of Mars," reported Lisa Ward, who now served as the tactical officer on the bridge. "They're holding position." A communication request appeared on the main screen. Olivia nodded to the communications officer, and the face of a Zarketh commander filled the display. The alien had grayish skin with ridges along its skull and 4 yellow eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. Its mouth was filled with small, sharp teeth. "Humans, this is your final warning," the alien said in a harsh voice that the translation computers struggled to make understandable. "Your time is up. Surrender now, or we will begin bombardment of your population centers." Admiral Porter stepped forward. "This is Admiral William Porter of the United Earth Space Force. We reject your demands. The people of Earth will not surrender to invaders. We request that you leave our solar system immediately." The Zarketh commander made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your primitive species has no concept of the power of the Imperium. We have conquered 1,000 worlds. Your defiance is meaningless." The communication ended abruptly. Almost immediately, the Zarketh fleet began to move again, spreading out into an attack formation. "They're launching fighter craft," Lisa announced as smaller vessels began pouring out of the larger ships. "Hundreds of them." Olivia turned to Admiral Porter. "Sir, we should order the defense fleet to engage the fighters while we focus on their capital ships." Porter nodded his agreement, and Olivia sent the orders. The smaller Earth vessels moved forward, their weapons charging. In the pilot's chamber, Greg closed his eyes again, focusing on the connection with the ship. Through the alien memories in the system, he recognized the Zarketh tactics. They always began with fighter attacks to overwhelm defensive systems before their main ships moved in. It was a strategy that had worked for them hundreds of times before. "Captain, I believe we can engage the entire fleet simultaneously," Greg said, his voice unnaturally calm. The Arcturus was designed to counter exactly this kind of attack pattern. On the bridge, Olivia exchanged glances with Porter. "Lieutenant, are you certain?" "We haven't tested the main weapons in actual combat conditions." "I am certain, Captain. The ship is showing me how. Greg couldn't explain the strange confidence he felt. It was as if he had fought this battle many times before. Olivia made her decision quickly. All hands prepare for combat. Lieutenant Howard, you have weapons free. Engage at your discretion. The Zarketh fighters approached rapidly, expecting to meet resistance from Earth's smaller vessels. Instead, the Arcturus suddenly accelerated forward at a speed that seemed impossible for a ship of its size. Blue energy began to build along specialized ports on its hull. In the pilot's chamber, Greg felt the weapon systems come fully online. The particle beam technology they had copied from the ancient ship was far more advanced than anything humans had developed on their own. Each beam could be precisely targeted and could adjust its power output automatically based on the target. Greg didn't need to press buttons or give verbal commands. He simply thought about the attack pattern, and the ship responded instantly. Multiple beam emitters activated simultaneously, each targeting a different Zarketh fighter. Brilliant blue energy lanced out in dozens of directions at once, striking the small alien craft with perfect accuracy. The Zarketh fighters began exploding one after another. In less than 30 seconds, half of them were destroyed, and the rest were breaking formation in confusion. On the Zarketh command ship, the alien leader stared at the display in disbelief. What kind of weapon is this? How can one ship target so many vessels simultaneously? His second-in-command studied the readings with growing concern. The energy signature is similar to our own beam weapons, but far more focused. And the targeting system is beyond anything we've encountered before. The commander hissed in anger. Launch all remaining fighters and move the fleet forward. Whatever this ship is, it cannot stand against our combined firepower. The Zarketh capital ships began to advance their weapons, charging. Each one carried enough firepower to level a city, and together they had conquered countless worlds. On the Arcturus, Greg sensed the change in tactics. The ship's defensive systems activated automatically, energy shields forming layers of protection around the hull. At the same time, he began accessing more of the ship's capabilities, drawing on the ancient memories embedded in its systems. Captain, the Arcturus can do something unexpected, Greg reported. It can phase partially out of normal space for short periods. The aliens won't be able to target us effectively while we're phased, but we can still attack them. Olivia was surprised but didn't hesitate. Do it, Lieutenant. Give them everything we've got. The Arcturus seemed to flicker, becoming partially transparent as Greg activated the phase technology. The Zarketh weapons fired massive energy blasts that passed harmlessly through the human ship. At the same time, the Arcturus continued firing its own weapons, which were somehow able to affect the alien vessels even while phased. Earth's defense fleet joined the battle, engaging the remaining Zarketh fighters while the Arcturus focused on the capital ships. One by one, the alien vessels began taking heavy damage, their shields failing under the precise attacks. This is impossible, the Zarketh commander shouted as his flagship shuddered from another direct hit. No species at this development stage should have this technology. Where did they get it? 3 of the Zarketh ships had already been disabled, their main systems offline. The others were trying to regroup, but the Arcturus moved with impossible speed, appearing behind vessels and striking before they could respond. On Earth, billions of people watched the battle through telescope feeds. What they had expected to be humanity's darkest hour was turning into an unprecedented victory. A single human ship was defeating an alien armada. In the pilot's chamber, Greg was changing. His connection to the ship was growing stronger, his mind expanding to accommodate the flood of information from the ancient systems. He could see patterns in space and time that no human had perceived before. The Arcturus wasn't just responding to his commands, it was merging, with him, teaching him, showing him possibilities beyond human understanding. After 2 hours of battle, half of the Zarketh fleet was disabled or destroyed. The remaining ships began to retreat, pulling back from Earth toward the outer solar system. They're running, Lisa announced on the bridge, her voice filled with disbelief and joy. Olivia turned to Admiral Porter. Should we pursue? Porter considered for a moment. No, let them go for now. They'll report back to their leaders. We need to prepare for what comes next. In the pilot's chamber, Greg finally opened his eyes. They glowed slightly with an inner blue light the same color as the ship's energy systems. Captain, they'll be back, he said quietly. With a bigger fleet. The Zarketh never retreat for long. Then we'll be ready for them, Olivia replied. Lieutenant Howard, you and the Arcturus have just made history. For the first time, Humanity has successfully defended itself against an alien invasion. Greg nodded, but his mind was elsewhere, processing the vast amount of information he had accessed during the battle. The Arcturus had shown him something important, something about the original builders of the ship and why they had created such a powerful weapon. There was a greater threat out there, something that had frightened even the advanced species that built the original vessel. As the Arcturus turned back toward Earth, Greg knew that this battle was only the beginning. Humanity had won its first interstellar conflict, but the real war was just starting, and he was now part of something much bigger than himself, something that would change the course of human history forever. 3 days had passed since the battle with the Zarketh fleet. The Arcturus was docked at Earth's orbital station for repairs and resupply. Despite its advanced technology, the ship had taken damage during the fight. Its self-repair systems were working but needed time to complete the process. Greg Howard sat alone in his quarters, staring at his reflection in a small mirror. The changes were subtle but undeniable. His eyes occasionally glowed with a faint blue light, the same color as the ship's energy systems. Even disconnected from the neural interface, he could feel the Arcturus at the edge of his mind, like a constant presence. The ship was becoming part of him in ways the scientists hadn't predicted. A soft knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Dr. Susan Mitchell entered, carrying a medical scanner. Now serving as the chief medical officer for the Arcturus, she had been monitoring Greg's condition closely. "How are you feeling today, Lieutenant?" she asked, activating the scanner. Greg shrugged. "Different. I can still feel the ship even when I'm not connected. And I keep seeing memories that aren't mine. Battle stars burning, entire civilizations falling." Susan frowned at the scanner readings. "Your neural patterns are changing. The connection with the ship is altering your brain structure. We should consider limiting your time in the interface." "We can't," Greg said firmly. "I'm the only one who can pilot the Arcturus at its full capacity. And we're going to need every advantage when the Zarketh return." Susan looked concerned but didn't argue. She knew as well as anyone that Earth's survival might depend on Greg's unique connection with the ship. The bridge captain, Olivia Clark, was meeting with Admiral Porter and the leaders of Earth's United Defense Forces. Holographic displays showed the current positions of Earth's fleet and the outer system monitoring stations. "The remaining Zarketh ships have retreated beyond Neptune's orbit," Olivia explained, pointing to red markers on the display. "But our long-range scanners have detected a much larger fleet approaching from outside the solar system. Based on their current speed, they'll arrive in approximately 2 weeks. Admiral Porter's face was grim. "How many ships?" "At least 200, Olivia replied, "including what appears to be a command vessel 3 times the size of their standard warships." One of the defense leaders, a general from the Asian Alliance, leaned forward. "Can the Arcturus stand against such numbers?" "Even with its advanced technology, those odds seem impossible." "Lieutenant Howard believes the ship hasn't yet operated at its full potential," Olivia said. "He's accessing more of its capabilities with each connection to the interface." In a secure laboratory deep within the orbital station, Kate Nelson was studying data recovered from the Arcturus's memory systems. The more they learned about the ship, the more questions arose about its original builders and purpose. "Look at this," she said to Paul Garcia, who now served as her deputy engineer. Kate pointed to a series of schematics on her screen. The Arcturus was designed to be part of a larger fleet. Its systems are meant to synchronize with other ships of similar design. Paul studied the diagrams with interest. "Could we build more ships like it? Use the same technology to create our own fleet?" "Theoretically, yes," Kate replied. "But it took us 5 years to build just one with the help of the original alien vessel. We don't have time to construct more before the Zarketh return." Their conversation was interrupted by an alert on Kate's communication device. It was a message from Greg requesting their presence in the pilot's chamber immediately. When Kate and Paul arrived, they found Greg sitting in the neural interface chair with Susan monitoring his vital signs. Greg's eyes were closed, but his face showed intense concentration. "What's happening?" Kate asked, moving closer. Susan looked up from her medical scanner. "He insisted on connecting to the ship even while docked. He said there was something important in the memory banks that he needed to access." Greg's eyes suddenly opened, glowing bright blue. "I found it," he said, his voice strangely calm. "I know why the precursors built this ship." "The precursors?" Paul asked. "The original builders," Greg explained. "That's what they called themselves. They were an ancient species that evolved in this galaxy millions of years before humans appeared on Earth. Greg gestured with his hand and a holographic display activated, showing strange symbols that shifted and changed. The Arcturus wasn't just built as a warship. It was designed as a seed, a way to pass on their knowledge and technology to a worthy successor species. The hologram changed, showing a star map of the galaxy with certain regions highlighted in red. The precursors were nearly wiped out by an enemy they called the Void Entities, beings that exist partially outside normal space. The Zarketh are just scavengers who rose to power after the precursors fell, taking their technology and using it to build their empire. Kate stared at the display in fascination. "Are you saying the ship chose us? That it was waiting to be found?" Greg nodded. The neural interface was designed to test compatible species. The precursors engineered it to find a species with the right balance of logic and creativity, aggression and compassion. Human brains are surprisingly similar to precursor neural patterns. On the bridge, Captain Clark was reviewing battle strategies with her tactical team when the communication system activated. Greg's face appeared on the main screen, his eyes still glowing with blue light. "Captain, we need to change our approach," he said without preamble. "I've accessed new information from the ship's memory banks. The Arcturus has capabilities we haven't used yet." Olivia looked surprised but quickly recovered. "What kind of capabilities, Lieutenant?" "The ship can create temporal distortion fields," Greg explained. "It can literally slow down time around enemy vessels, making them move and react at a fraction of normal speed. And there's more. The phase technology can be weaponized, creating energy pulses that can disable multiple ships simultaneously." Admiral Porter, who had been listening, stepped into view of the screen. "How did you discover this, Lieutenant?" "The ship showed me," Greg replied simply. "The more I connect with it, the more it reveals. The precursors built failsafes into the technology. It only shares certain information when the pilot demonstrates the ability to handle it. Over the next 2 weeks, Earth prepared for the coming battle. The defense fleet was reorganized based on Greg's suggestions, with smaller vessels positioned to support the Arcturus rather than engaging directly. Every available weapon was brought online and the planet's surface defenses were strengthened. Greg spent most of his time connected to the ship, learning, absorbing, growing. His human identity was still dominant, but it was now merged with something else, something ancient and powerful. The knowledge of the precursors flowed through him, reshaping his understanding of the universe. The day of the battle arrived sooner than expected. The Zarketh fleet appeared at the edge of the solar system, moving faster than their previous approach. At the center of their formation was an enormous vessel that dwarfed even their largest warships. "That's their supreme command ship," Greg told Captain Clark as the Arcturus moved to intercept. "Their leader is on board. He's called the Sovereign, and he's recognized the design of our ship. He knows we're using precursor technology." Olivia studied the tactical display with concern. "There are over 200 ships out there, Lieutenant. Even with the Arcturus's capabilities, those are terrible odds." Greg smiled slightly. "The precursors faced worse and still managed to build this ship before they fell. We won't let their legacy go to waste." The Arcturus accelerated toward the approaching fleet, its engines glowing with blue fire. Behind it, Earth's defense vessels moved into support positions, ready to engage when ordered. The battle was about to begin again, but this time the stakes were even higher. The Zarketh had returned with overwhelming force, determined to crush the upstart species that had dared to defy them. But they didn't understand what they were truly facing. They didn't know that the ship they were about to fight wasn't just built with precursor technology, it was fulfilling the precursors' final mission, finding a successor to their legacy. The distance closed. Greg felt the Arcturus's systems come fully online, power flowing through every circuit, every weapon, every shield. The ship wasn't just a tool anymore, it was a partner joined with him in purpose and determination. Together they would defend Earth. Together they would show the Zarketh that humanity was not a species to be conquered. The first shots were fired across the void of space, and the greatest battle in human history began. The space between Earth and Mars became a battlefield unlike anything humans had ever witnessed. Brilliant energy beams cut through the darkness as hundreds of ships engaged in combat. At the center of it all, the Arcturus moved with impossible grace, phasing in and out of normal space, appearing behind enemy vessels and striking before they could respond. Greg Howard no longer felt like a separate entity from the ship. His consciousness had expanded, becoming one with the ancient technology. Through the neural interface, he could feel every weapon, every shield generator, every movement. He could see in all directions at once, perceiving patterns in space and time that no human had ever witnessed before. The Arcturus activated, its temporal distortion field creating a bubble of altered time around a group of Zarketh warships. From the outside, it appeared as if the alien vessels had suddenly begun moving in slow motion. Their reactions delayed their weapons firing at a fraction of normal speed. The Arcturus took advantage of their vulnerable state, targeting critical systems with precise beam strikes. On the bridge, Captain Olivia Clark coordinated with Earth's defense fleet, directing smaller vessels to support the Arcturus and protect vulnerable positions. Despite their technological disadvantage, the human ships fought with determination and clever tactics. "The Sovereign's vessel is moving forward," reported Lisa Ward from the tactical station. "It's charging what appears to be a main cannon," Olivia opened a communication channel to Greg. "Lieutenant," he advised, "the enemy command ship is preparing to fire." In the pilot's chamber, Greg didn't respond with words. Instead, he directed the Arcturus toward the massive Zarketh flagship. The Sovereign's vessel was truly enormous, with weapons ports covering its angular hull. At its front, a large cannon began glowing with gathered energy. "He's going to target Earth directly," Greg communicated through the ship's systems. "The weapon has enough power to penetrate our planetary defenses." The Arcturus accelerated to maximum speed, racing to intercept. The Sovereign's cannon fired a massive energy beam that cut through space like a spear of light. At the last possible moment, the Arcturus positioned itself in the beam's path, activating all shield layers simultaneously. The impact was tremendous. Even with its advanced precursor technology, the Arcturus shuddered under the force of the blast. Shield layers flared and failed one after another as the energy threatened to overwhelm the ship's defenses. In the pilot's chamber, Greg felt the strain as if it were happening to his own body. He pushed the ship's systems beyond their normal limits, drawing power from reserves that hadn't been accessed before. The final shield layer held, absorbing the last of the beam's energy. "Impossible." The Zarketh Sovereign's voice boomed through communication channels as he witnessed his most powerful weapon fail. "No vessel should be able to withstand that blast." Greg directed the Arcturus forward, maintaining momentum toward the enemy flagship. "You don't understand what you're facing," he replied, his voice strangely calm. "This ship was built by the precursors, the same precursors your kind tried to destroy." There was a moment of silence before the Sovereign responded. "The precursors were weak. They had the technology to rule the galaxy, but lacked the will to use it properly. We have corrected their mistake." "No," Greg said as the Arcturus continued its approach. "They weren't weak. They were wise. They built this ship not to conquer, but to protect, to preserve knowledge, and pass it to a worthy successor." The Sovereign's vessel fired again, multiple weapon systems activating simultaneously. The Arcturus phased partially out of normal space, allowing most of the energy to pass harmlessly through it, while continuing its advance. Throughout the solar system, the battle raged. Earth's defense fleet had suffered heavy losses, but they had also disabled dozens of enemy ships. The Arcturus had destroyed or disabled nearly 50 Zarketh vessels using its advanced weaponry and tactical advantages. Dr. Susan Mitchell watched the battle from the medical bay where she treated wounded crew members. Through the viewport, she could see the Arcturus moving like a dancer through the chaos, its hull glowing with blue energy as it fired in multiple directions at once. "It's beautiful," she whispered to herself. "Terrifying but beautiful." In orbit around Earth, Admiral Porter coordinated the planet's final defenses. If the Arcturus and the defense fleet failed, these would be humanity's last line of protection. "Status report on the Arcturus?" he demanded from the monitoring station. "Shield strength at 40%, came the reply. "Hull integrity holding. Lieutenant Howard's neural patterns are stable but showing increasing integration with the ship's systems." Porter nodded grimly. They had all known the risks when they approved the neural interface. Greg Howard was sacrificing his humanity to save his species. It was a price they hadn't wanted to pay but had no choice but to accept. The Arcturus finally reached the Sovereign's flagship, coming alongside the massive vessel. At this range, the Zarketh couldn't bring their main weapons to bear without risking damage to their own ship. "Your empire was built on stolen technology," Greg communicated to the Sovereign. "You took what the precursors created and used it to conquer and destroy. but you never understood the true purpose of their greatest achievements. Inside the enemy flagship, the Sovereign raged, ordering his crew to destroy the human vessel at any cost. Smaller weapons fired at point-blank range, most of them absorbed by the Arcturus's remaining shields. Greg accessed the final weapon system the precursors had built into their ship. It was a technology so powerful they had locked it behind multiple safeguards, ensuring it could only be used as a last resort. The precursors called it the Harmony Cascade. Greg explained to Captain Clark through their communication link. It creates a wave of energy that disrupts all technology not tuned to its specific frequency. It will disable the Zarketh ships without destroying them. Olivia understood the significance. You're offering them a chance to surrender. Yes, Greg replied. The precursors believed in preservation, not destruction. Even of their enemies. The Arcturus began to pulse with light energy building within its core systems. The Zarketh ships continued their attack, unaware of what was about to happen. This is Lieutenant Greg Howard of the Earth ship Arcturus. Greg broadcast on all frequencies. To all Zarketh vessels, your technology will be disabled in 30 seconds. Power down your weapons and prepare for boarding or face destruction. The Sovereign's response was immediate and predictable. We will never surrender to a lesser species. The Imperium has ruled for 1,000 years and will continue for 1,000 more. Greg didn't argue further. The Arcturus released the Harmony Cascade, a wave of blue energy expanding outward in all directions. As it passed over the Zarketh vessels, their systems failed, weapons powering down, engines stalling, shields collapsing. Only the Arcturus and Earth's defense fleet remained operational, protected by the specific frequency Greg had programmed into the wave. In less than a minute, the mighty Zarketh armada was reduced to floating hulks. Only emergency life support systems remained functional. All enemy ships have been neutralized, Lisa reported on the Arcturus bridge, her voice filled with disbelief and joy. They're completely disabled. Olivia turned to her communications officer. Send the message to all Earth forces. The Zarketh fleet has been defeated. Begin boarding operations on the disabled vessels. In the following hours, Earth's ships approached the powerless Zarketh vessels, taking control and securing the alien crews. The Sovereign himself was captured when Earth forces boarded his flagship. The Arcturus returned to Earth, orbit its hull bearing the scars of battle. In the pilot's chamber, Greg Howard finally disconnected from the neural interface. When he opened his eyes, they still glowed with blue light, a permanent reminder of his bond with the ship. Admiral Porter met him as he walked unsteadily from the chamber. Lieutenant, you've done the impossible. You've saved not just Earth, but possibly all of humanity. Greg smiled weakly. The Arcturus did it, sir. I was just the connection it needed. What happens now? Porter asked. The Zarketh have been defeated, but according to what you learned, there are greater threats out there. Greg nodded, looking out a viewport at the blue-green planet below. The precursors left us more than just this ship. They left plans, designs, knowledge. They were preparing us to take their place as guardians of this part of the galaxy. 2 weeks later, in a secure facility beneath the Martian surface, Kate Nelson stood with Greg, Susan, and Captain Clark, examining holographic schematics that floated in the air before them. The designs showed multiple vessels of varying sizes, all incorporating precursor technology. We can build more ships like the Arcturus, Kate explained. Not identical, but based on the same principles. A fleet of our own to defend Earth and eventually explore beyond our solar system. Greg studied the designs, his eyes still glowing faintly blue. The connection with the Arcturus had permanently changed him, making him something more than human but not less. He carried the legacy of two species, now human and precursor joined in one mind. The void entities are still out there, he said quietly. The real enemy that the precursors fought against. They exist partially outside normal space, consuming entire stars. According to the ship's records, they'll reach our galaxy again in about 10 years. Susan looked concerned. Can we prepare in time?